يا ساتر الحق.
You know, in construction, some of the biggest dangers, they're the ones hiding right in front of us. Today, we're going to tackle one of the big ones from OSHA's Focus 4, the deadly and honestly often misunderstood risk of caught in or between hazards.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll kick things off by defining what this hazard actually is. Then we'll get into some pretty sobering statistics, break down the 3 most common ways this happens on a site, and, most importantly, talk about what you can do to stay safe.
All right, Section 1, defining the crushing hazard. So let's get right down to it. What exactly are we talking about here?
Okay, this is absolutely crucial, and it's a point of confusion for a lot of folks. We need to know the difference between caught in and struck by. Think of it like this. A struck by hazard is about the impact from a single thing hitting you. Pow! But a caught in or between hazard, that's about being crushed, squeezed between 2 or more objects. It's a totally different kind of force, and understanding that difference is everything.
And here's the official word from OSHA. You see all those terms, squeezed, caught, crushed, pinched, compressed? They all point to the same thing, right? The injury comes from that crushing force between 2 separate objects or even between different parts of the same machine.
Okay, Section 2, the deadly statistics. Let's look at the numbers, because they really tell the story of why this is one of OSHA's Focus 4. So look at this number, 92. I want you to just let that sink in for a second. That isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. That's 92 people, 92 families, 92 crews, 92 lives that were cut short.
And here's what that 92 means. That's the number of construction workers killed by these caught in or between hazards in just 1 year. We're talking about nearly 10% of all fatalities in private construction. This isn't a rare accident. It's a serious, persistent killer on our job sites.
All right, Section 3, the 3 common traps. Look, if you don't want to become one of those statistics, you got to know where the traps are laid. So let's break down the 3 most common scenarios you're going to face.
So our first trap is unguarded machinery. And this right here, this is from a real OSHA investigation. A 56-year-old boring machine operator, his trouser leg gets caught in the rotating rod. Just like that, he was flipped over and killed. It shows you just how fast a normal day can turn into a tragedy.
And this image here shows you exactly what that looks like. You've got this rotating part, and if it's not guarded, it's basically a trap waiting to spring. Think about shafts, pulleys, gears, chains, anything that moves. It can grab a piece of your clothing or a part of your body and pull you in faster than you can even think to react.
So how do you prevent this? The steps are pretty simple, but they are absolutely vital. First, before you even start up a machine, just take a second to visually check that the guards are in place. They're there for a reason. Second, if you're doing any kind of maintenance, you have to use lockout/tagout procedures to make sure that machine is de-energized. No shortcuts. And finally, something you control. Don't wear loose clothes or jewelry that can get snagged. It's that simple.
Okay, our second trap, being buried. This almost always means a trench collapse, which is one of the most terrifying accidents in construction. And again, this is from a real OSHA case. An employee's down in a trench, about 12 to 15 feet deep, it wasn't shored or sloped, and the wall gives way. He was completely buried.
You have to understand, there's just no fighting against the weight of collapsing earth. I mean, a single cubic yard of dirt can weigh as much as a car. A car! You have zero chance of escape. This is exactly why trenching is considered one of the most dangerous jobs out there.
So listen up, because this rule is simple, and it is absolute. You never, ever enter a trench that's 5 feet deep or more unless there is a protective system in place. I'm talking about sloping, shoring, or using a trench shield. There are no exceptions, no just-for-a-minute scenarios. It's a hard and fast rule.
And that brings us to our third common trap, getting pinned between a piece of equipment and something that doesn't move, like a wall. This is another tragic real-world case. An employee tried to walk between the swinging part of a backhoe and a concrete wall. He was in the operator's blind spot, and he was crushed.
Yeah, this image right here shows that danger zone perfectly. That area is called the swing radius of the excavator, and for anyone on foot, it should be a total no-go zone. It's not just about getting bumped or hit, it's about being pinned with a force that you cannot survive.
So how do you stay safe? It all comes down to situational awareness.
You've got to know where the heavy equipment is at all times and where it's headed. Never, ever put yourself in that pinch point between moving equipment and a stationary object. And a big one, communicate. Make eye contact with the operator, get a thumbs up, make sure they see you before you get anywhere near their machine.
Okay, Section 4, how to stay safe. Look, knowing where the traps are is half the battle, for sure. But now let's get into the specifics of staying safe, because it really is a team effort. It's about your role and your employer's duty.
When it comes to trenching, think of this as your personal 4-step survival plan. You got to burn this into your brain. Step 1, never go into an unprotected trench 5 feet or deeper. Step 2, you have to verify that a protective system, sloping, shoring, or shield is actually being used. Step 3, use a ladder or a ramp. Don't just jump in. And step 4, once you're in, you stay inside that protected area, always.
And it's not all on you. This table lays out your employer's legal responsibilities, plain and simple. They have to provide things like machine guards, protective systems for trenches, and rollover protection on equipment. And this is a huge one. They have to train you and designate what's called a competent person to keep an eye on things.
Which brings us to our final and maybe the most critical piece of this whole safety puzzle, that competent person.
So what does that even mean? Well, OSHA has a very specific definition. A competent person isn't just the guy who's been around the longest. It's someone who can actually identify existing and predictable hazards. And, this is the key part, they have the authority to take action and eliminate those hazards. They can stop the work. They're your designated safety leader on that site.
So I'm going to leave you with this one question. Tomorrow, when you get to your job site, I want you to look around and ask yourself, who is the competent person here? Who's the one responsible for inspecting this work and keeping us safe? If you don't know the answer to that question, your first task of the day is to find out, because knowing who that person is, well, it could literally save your life.
All right, let's talk about a type of hazard that's, well, hiding in plain sight on pretty much every single job site. These are the cut in or between hazards. We're going to start with the big 3. First, you've got machinery with unguarded moving parts. You know, things like belts, gears, and pulleys. They can snag loose clothing in just a split second and pull a worker right in. Second, any work that happens inside excavations or trenches. The single biggest danger here is being buried alive if an unsupported wall collapses. And third, heavy equipment. A worker can get pinned between a machine, say a crane or a loader, and a solid object. This happens a lot in an operator's blind spot. So yeah, these are the 3 deadliest zones to watch out for. Let's take a closer look at each one.
Okay, first up, unguarded machinery. What you're looking at here is one of the most direct dangers out there. I mean, any machine with rotating or moving parts, think belts, gears, shafts, or pulleys, can instantly become a trap. If a guard is missing, or maybe somebody took it off for maintenance and forgot to put it back, a piece of loose clothing or even just a glove can get snagged, and just like that, it pulls a worker into the machine. It's that fast.
Next, we have excavations and trenches. The major hazard here is a cave-in. See, without the right support systems in place, the walls of a trench can just collapse without any warning. You're talking about burying workers under literally thousands of pounds of soil. That can lead to catastrophic crushing injuries and, of course, suffocation. This is honestly one of the most dangerous situations you can find yourself in all of construction.
And that brings us to heavy equipment. The danger we're focused on here is being pinned. This happens all too often when a worker gets caught between a piece of equipment, like the swinging part of a backhoe, and something that doesn't move, like a wall. These incidents frequently happen in the operator's blind spot, which just goes to show how absolutely critical situational awareness is for every single person on that site.
So we've seen where these dangers are lurking, but, to really understand how to prevent them, we've got to be super clear about what we're actually up against. So let's ask the question, what exactly is a cut-in or cut-between hazard?
Take a look at the specific language here. OSHA's definition is this broad for a very good reason. It's not just about being completely crushed. It actually covers any situation where you are squeezed, caught, pinched, or compressed. And that could be anything from a relatively minor injury all the way up to a fatal one.
It is also so important to understand the difference between a struck event and a caught event. A struck-by injury happens from the impact of an object by itself. Like a hammer falling and hitting your foot. A caught-in or between injury is different. It's the crushing force between 2 objects that does the real harm. So the key thing to remember is that compression.
And this is exactly why it matters so much. In 2008 alone, 92 workers in the private construction industry died from these very hazards. That was about 9%, so nearly 1 in 10 of all construction fatalities that year. These are not freak accidents, right? They are a consistent and deadly part of the job if the right precautions are not taken.
So, with the stakes being this high, it's just not enough to know the dangers. You need a real, practical plan to keep yourself safe. Let's break down the essential steps every single worker has to take.
Think of this checklist as your personal line of defense. First, before you even think about turning a machine on, physically check that all the guards are in place. Second, if you're doing any maintenance, make absolutely sure that equipment is de-energized using lockout/tagout procedures. Third, be constantly aware of the swing radius of cranes and backhoes and just stay clear. Fourth, and this one is completely non-negotiable, never ever enter an unprotected trench that's 5 feet deep or more. And finally, always wear your seatbelt. If that equipment tips over, the seatbelt is what keeps you inside the protective cab instead of getting thrown out and crushed.
But look, safety isn't just on you. Your employer has legal and moral obligations to give you a safe place to work. There are specific safety measures that they are legally required to put in place.
This table here really lays out those key responsibilities pretty clearly. For machinery, they must provide guards. For maintenance, they must have a lockout/tagout program. For heavy equipment, rollover protection and seatbelts are mandatory. And for any trenching operation, they must provide protection systems, and this is huge, designate a competent person. These aren't just suggestions, they're requirements.
Now that last point I made about the competent person, it's absolutely crucial. In fact, you could argue this role is the single most important safety factor on any construction site. This is so much more than just a job title. Look at the two parts of this definition. First, they have to be capable of identifying hazards. Okay, that makes sense. But the second part is the real key. They must have the authorization to take prompt corrective measures. What does that mean? It means they have the power to stop the job right there on the spot to fix a dangerous situation.
And their responsibilities directly target these deadly hazards we've been talking about. They conduct daily inspections of excavations before anyone is allowed to enter. They supervise the building of scaffolds. They're the ones doing surveys before demolition to check for instability. This person is basically the site's designated safety expert, whose entire job is to actively look for and eliminate these dangers.
Look, staying informed is one of the best ways to stay safe out there. For more deep dives into occupational safety, make sure you follow us and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks so much for watching.